Hey! What time do you think it is? Looking at the clock, it's still 5:30 a.m. What time? It's still 5:30. What's up with you, getting up this early? I answered groggily, but Brandon keeps on relentlessly. What do you mean it's still 5:30? It's common sense for a wife to get up earlier than her husband, get ready, and prepare breakfast. Hearing Brandon rage like that first thing in the morning, I couldn't believe my ears. When on earth did we go back in time? It's like a line straight out of an old-fashioned drama. Ever since marrying Brandon, we've had separate bedrooms, and no intimacy at all. Then one day, Brandon collapsed at work and had to be urgently admitted to the hospital for surgery. Waiting outside the OR, I heard a young doctor scream. "Oh! What in the world is this?" This surgery would reveal Brandon's surprising secret to me, as well as how difficult my situation really was. And realizing I couldn't go on like this, I decided to reclaim my true self, with some help from someone. My name is Natalie Scott, a 42-year-old helping with my family business. Before getting married, I worked in healthcare. The job was somewhat enjoyable, but among my friends, I was the only one not married. With both my parents already passed away and me being all alone at home, I was anxious to get married. Then, one day, as I was drinking alone in a bar, a man approached me. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" The man who spoke to me was Brandon, my now husband. Brandon was 3 years older than me and owned a small manufacturing business. As we talked, it seemed he was also single without a partner. We hit it off, sharing stories about our lives. Two single adults. I was hoping for a somewhat romantic night, but we just made plans to meet again and called it an early night. From there, we naturally started dating, meeting up once a week. Dates with the quiet and serious Brandon were just calm conversations in cafes or parks. But his seemingly kind nature gradually drew me in. And then, on our third date. Hey! It doesn't make sense to date aimlessly, right? Watching Brandon nervously bring it up, I got a bit excited. Are you saying? Yes, I know we've only been dating for a month, but considering our ages, I was thinking, maybe we should consider your marriage? Is that okay with you? Truly, it was an unusual proposal. I did think so, but I was also eager to get married and I thought Brandon was a good person, so I quickly replied with a yes. Yes! I want to spend my life with you. As soon as I agreed, Brandon showed a broad smile, delighted by my response. Since both of us had no parents, we decided to have a small wedding and just complete our marriage registration. To help with Brandon's company, I quit my job as we got married. And so began our married life with Brandon. But it was also the start of days filled with anguish. Brandon and I had no intimate relations from the time we met until we got married. I thought Brandon was just being serious and didn't want to engage in frivolous relationships with women. I believed that once we were married, we would be able to enjoy our life together as husband and wife. That's what I believed. But on the first day of our marriage, Brandon made some unexpected rules. I'll sleep in this bedroom, so Natalie, please sleep in another room. Also, since I come home late from work, go ahead and use the bathroom first. I was surprised by Brandon's statement and asked with a tone of disbelief. Wait, does that mean we are going to sleep separately? Even though we're a couple? Even when I asked, Brandon, with an indifferent face, insisted on his point of view. I can't sleep well when someone else is in the same room. Despite feeling dissatisfied with his reasoning, I didn't want to start an argument on the first day, so I didn't say anything more. The next morning, I was startled awake by a loud voice before the alarm set for 6 a.m. went off. Hey! What time do you think it is? Looking at the clock, it was still 5:30 a.m. What time? It's still 5:30. What's going on, waking up this early? I answered sleepily, but Brandon continued without mercy. What do you mean it's still 5:30? It's common sense for a wife to wake up earlier than her husband, get ready, and prepare breakfast. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from Brandon yelling early in the morning. What era are we talking about here? It felt like a line from an old-timey drama. However, looking at Brandon's face, I saw an anger I hadn't seen before. Thinking it best not to argue, I quickly got dressed and started preparing the meal. It may be taken for granted, but even though we have separate bedrooms, we still eat together. As we sat across from each other at the breakfast table, something caught my attention. It was already July, yet Brandon was wearing a long-sleeved sweater. Thinking that I might have to prepare summer clothes for him, I asked Brandon. "I'm sorry for only having a sweater available at this time of year. Should I be preparing summer clothes for you?" At my question, Brandon started choking on his food, coughing out his response in a hurry. "No, I wear this all year round. I get cold easily. You know, with the air conditioning, it gets chilly in the upcoming season." If he really dislikes the cold, that would make sense. But there was no need for him to panic like that. Brandon's unnatural behavior left me unsure of how to respond. From then on, even though I helped out at the company in the morning, Brandon told me to come home early in the evening to prepare dinner, so I returned home early. Brandon didn't just comment on the meals, he had detailed complaints about the cleaning and laundry as well, leaving me no time to relax even when I came home early. I cleaned every corner of the house and neatly folded and put away the dry laundry. Preparing dinner and taking a shower before Brandon got home became my daily routine after we got married. Brandon is the type of husband who doesn't lift a finger at home. I understand he's busy being a business owner, but I wish he would help out with the housework a little. I think so, but even a slight complaint might set him off yelling again. While making dinner, I suddenly wondered, what did I get married for? Ever since then, our bedrooms have been separate, so there's no intimacy at all. Right now, I don't feel happy at all, even though we got married. Rather, I might have even lost sight of my true self. Thinking so, I suddenly felt overwhelmed with sadness, and tears started flowing endlessly. While I was sobbing alone, around 5 p.m., my phone rang with a call from the company. It was one of our female employees. "It's serious. The boss suddenly collapsed. We've called an ambulance, so please head to the hospital immediately." Hearing that, I was momentarily lost for words. Sensing my state, the employee calmly told me the name of the hospital. Trying to compose myself, I thanked the employee and immediately called a taxi. Upon arriving at the hospital and giving my name at the reception, I was guided to the treatment room where Brandon was. I was told to wait outside, so I sat on a chair placed in front of the door. The door to the treatment room opened, and a veteran doctor, about Brandon's age, came out. I stood up and approached the doctor. "Excuse me, I'm Natalie Scott, Brandon's wife. How is my husband's condition?" "Your husband is not in life-threatening condition, but he needs to be hospitalized immediately and requires surgery." "Really?" After greeting the doctor, I didn't see Brandon but just completed the paperwork for his admission and surgery before going home. Normally, I would have stayed with him. The doctors and nurses might think I'm a cold wife, but I couldn't bring myself to stay by Brandon's side since we weren't close. And then, on the day of the surgery, I didn't go to see Brandon before the surgery and arrived at the hospital around the time it was supposed to start. While waiting outside, I heard a young man's scream coming from the operating room. "What in the world is this? What is the doctor saying?" It must have been the assistant doctor who screamed. The young doctor seemed frightened, and the chief surgeon reassured him. Yet, the young doctor responded in a voice that sounded as if he might start trembling at any moment. "Even if you say that, it's the first time I've ever seen such an incredible tattoo. What should I do?" "Stay calm. The tattoo won't interfere with the surgery." What was all the fuss about? The loud voices were even audible outside the operating room. I remember they were talking about tattoos. The assistant seemed unreliable, but since the chief surgeon appeared competent, I waited for the surgery to end with peace of mind. A few hours later, the surgery was over, and 2 doctors came out. One was the young doctor in his mid-20s who had screamed earlier. He looked as if he had seen something unpleasant. The other was the chief surgeon, the veteran doctor I had greeted the other day. He looked disappointedly at the young doctor. The young doctor indeed looked like a well-off young man who had never faced hardships. I stood up and looked at the veteran doctor. Beside him, the young doctor looked at me, looking apologetic, and said, "I'm sorry about your husband's back tattoo." Hey! Stop that. I didn't quite understand what the two were talking about. Especially the words of the young doctor. I've been hearing about a tattoo, but what does that mean? At my question, both doctors looked surprised. We're talking about the large demon tattoo on your husband's back. It covers his entire back, you know. I couldn't hide my surprise at the young doctor's unexpected reply. So that was why Brandon kept the bedroom separate. The veteran doctor remained composed. I apologize for the disturbance. The surgery went well. Your husband is going to be fine. Can I talk to my husband now? Yes, if you could wait a moment. After waiting for a while, I was guided into the treatment room. There lay Brandon, waking up from anesthesia, dressed in a hospital gown. Noticing me, Brandon looked uncomfortable. I didn't want you to see this. Why are you here when I didn't call for you? Brandon's blunt attitude left me unable to even say well done. Maybe Brandon thought it was bad that I found out about his long-hidden tattoo. Though I couldn't see the demon on his back, his shoulder area was clearly visible through the hospital gown. But why did Brandon think he could keep such a large tattoo hidden? Curious as I was, considering it was after surgery, I thought it might be better to ask about it later and didn't inquire further. Brandon just sulked and turned away. The young doctor looked back and forth between Brandon and me, asking if I wasn't going to say anything to my husband. I didn't know what to say in such a situation. Then, Brandon spoke up. Natalie. If you've got no business here, then leave. Excuse me? Having you stand there with that gloomy face makes it feel like a wake. Just go home, will you? At Brandon's words, the young doctor furrowed his brows and tilted his head in confusion. They're probably wondering if we're really a couple. Right. It seems pointless for me to stay, so I'll be going now. In the end, I left the hospital just as Brandon had told me to. I didn't feel like going straight home, so I had dinner out. As I was leaving the restaurant, a man called out to me from behind. Natalie. When I turned around, there stood Kevin Walker, the chief surgeon who had taken care of Brandon earlier. Kevin seemed to be on his way home from work. Thank you for everything. I was about to thank Kevin, but he started talking as if to cut me off. I was thinking, Brandon has such a nice wife. But it seems there's some complication? From Kevin's tone, it seemed he knew Brandon from before. What do you mean by that? Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. It just seemed strange to me. Normally, if a husband collapses at work and needs emergency hospitalization, his wife would stay by his side. I'm sorry for causing any trouble at the hospital. I apologized, thinking I had caused inconvenience to the hospital staff. But Kevin shook his head and replied, No, that's not what I meant. It's just that you seemed unaware of Brandon's tattoo. I found that curious. Kevin seemed to know something about the tattoo Brandon had. Curious, I asked him for more details. Kevin said he and Brandon were in the same middle school. Brandon started causing trouble around that time, riding motorcycles with his friends. He hardly ever attended school. At that time, to intimidate others, he got a large demon tattoo on his back. Kevin, who was the student leader at the time, couldn't stand such delinquency among his friends. We were in the same class in the first year. We weren't close, but I don't think Brandon was a bad guy from the start. Kevin seemed to have wanted to rehabilitate Brandon, the once serious student. Making a big decision, he confronted the delinquent group Brandon was part of, desperately trying to persuade him to change. Brandon, please, leave this group and come back to school, he said in front of all the delinquents. But despite his resolve, Kevin was treated harshly by Brandon's friends. However, Kevin's efforts may have paid off, as Brandon started attending school again and later went on to a high school after graduation. I was just surprised to learn about Brandon's past. It seems Brandon doesn't remember me anymore. But it's good to know he reformed and has been working seriously. However, it seems your marriage to him is not straightforward. It was embarrassing and disheartening to realize that our unusual marital relationship was apparent even to outsiders. I'm really embarrassed to be seen as an unnatural couple by others. At my words, Kevin lightly shook his head again. No, it's not you who's unnatural. It seems like Brandon is somehow neglecting you. Hearing that, I indeed started to feel the same. Somehow, I felt I could talk about anything with Kevin. Maybe as a doctor, he's used to supporting the families of patients. I felt somewhat guilty for burdening him with such personal matters. I'm sorry for troubling you with such private matters concerning a patient's family. No. Right now, I'm not talking to you as a doctor, but as a person. I used to confront Brandon because I couldn't stand his delinquency. Now, for a different reason, I find myself unable to forgive him again. At that time, I couldn't grasp the full meaning of Kevin's words. A different reason? I asked, and Kevin showed a bashful smile. Well, aside from that, if you ever get confused about Brandon, feel free to consult me. I might be able to help a little. Kevin's willingness to listen made me feel like I could talk to him about anything. He knew Brandon's past well. So, I thought if I shared my current situation with him, he might help me find a way to resolve my troubles. I told Kevin in detail about my relationship with Brandon from when we met to the present. Kevin listened intently, then frowned, looking concerned. Something's off. What was Brandon thinking when he got involved with you? I don't understand his feelings either. I answered, and tears began to well up in my eyes. Talking to someone made me realize how unsatisfied I was with the way I was living. Just leave it to me. I felt guilty for bothering someone else with my situation. But Kevin's kindness made me feel relieved and happy. I decided to try to resolve the ambiguous relationship with Brandon, with Kevin's help. The next morning, I visited Brandon's hospital room. I had heard from Kevin that his post-surgery condition was stable, so I wanted to talk to Brandon. However, Brandon wouldn't even look at me, just stared out the window. Still wanting to clarify the truth, I asked him without hesitation. Why have you been silent about this? Such a large tattoo was bound to be discovered eventually. Or did you plan to keep it hidden forever, even from your own wife? Brandon remained silent. Then, he muttered softly. I thought you would run away. Run away? What do you mean? When I pressed him, Brandon started to talk about his past relationships with women. According to him, every time he got involved with someone, the relationship would end as soon as they saw his tattoo. Brandon, who appears to be a respectable young man working earnestly. No one could possibly imagine that there's a large demon tattoo on his back. It looks as if he's part of some nefarious organization, a fearsome demon on his back. Weren't you only involved in bad activities until middle school? Why didn't you remove the tattoo when you reformed? As I pressed for answers, Brandon glared at me with fierce eyes and shouted. I didn't want to remove this tattoo, no matter what. Why? I wanted to know the truth behind Brandon's feelings, but he didn't seem willing to answer. Instead, he turned the questions on me. More importantly, how do you know about my middle school days? I never talked about that. I heard it from the person who was the student leader back then. Kevin? It seemed Brandon remembered Kevin. But knowing we had reunited, why had he remained silent? Kevin had desperately tried to reform Brandon. Kevin clearly remembered you, so why didn't you say even a word of thanks? It's thanks to him you were able to reform and become who you are today, isn't it? At my question, Brandon tilted his head. What are you misunderstanding? I decided to straighten up because a buddy of mine died in a motorcycle accident. I decided to quit riding bikes and live a straight life for his sake. This tattoo is, in a way, a keepsake of his. The truth about the tattoo was revealed. Still, I felt somewhat unsatisfied with Brandon's explanation. Why? Kevin also tried desperately to reform you, facing resistance from your friends. It's terrible to act like that doesn't matter. Stop nagging. Why do you keep taking his side? Do you like him or something? Brandon pressed, but I felt no guilt. After all, there was no reason for Brandon to be jealous in such a marital relationship. I decided it was time to clarify things and asked Brandon. What about you? Don't you like me? What did we get married for? Well, Brandon seemed at a loss for words. I glared at him, determined not to leave until I got a clear answer. So? Clarify it for me. Well, after my parents passed away in the last 3 years, I had no one to take care of the house. So, I thought I needed to get married to manage. Just for that. Knowing the real reason Brandon married me was a shock. Wanting no further discussion, I left the hospital room. Kevin was standing at the entrance. He led me to the lobby, saying it was best if Brandon didn't hear our conversation. It's just as I thought. Shall we proceed with the plan then? Yes. I decided to go ahead with the worst-case scenario plan Kevin had suggested. And 2 weeks passed. Today was Brandon's discharge day. However, since that day, I hadn't visited Brandon's room once and didn't go to the hospital to pick him up despite knowing he would be discharged. I have been busy at the company these 2 weeks. While Brandon was hospitalized, I had been acting as the head of the business, handling various procedures. Brandon was supposed to rest at home for a while after discharge. So, I prepared a day's meals in the morning and worked until evening. Since his hospitalization, Brandon and I had grown even more distant. With fewer face-to-face interactions, we argued less. However, avoiding each other worked well as I proceeded with my current task. A month after his discharge, as Brandon was getting better, he visited the company. Upon entering, he was shocked by the drastically changed interior. I watched secretly from the back office. What the heck? Even the manufacturing machines and employee desks are all gone. Hearing his exclamation, all the employees approached Brandon. Thank you for everything you've done for so long. What do you mean? Brandon, unable to grasp the situation, looked around bewildered. Seeing this, the employees exchanged glances. Probably unsure who should break the news. Actually, our company has been acquired by Walker Industries located in the same region. Starting tomorrow, we will be employed there. What? I haven't heard anything about this. Brandon's voice echoed throughout the office, surprised by the news of the acquisition. Thinking it was about time, I stepped forward in front of everyone. Oh? I'm sorry, Brandon. The decision was made quite suddenly, so I was late in informing you. What? A major decision like an acquisition should be discussed with me first. Brandon was fuming with anger. That's true, but actually, we've run into a bit of trouble, I said, showing him a photo. It was taken by a male employee who had recently left the company. The photo showed Brandon secretly changing in the men's locker room. It clearly captured the large demon tattoo on his back. The man thought the company president might be involved in some criminal organization, and after consulting with other employees, he left the company. And now, all the employees here harbor distrust towards Brandon. Not just because of the tattoo, but that wasn't the only reason. Since getting married, Brandon started delegating all the troublesome company procedures to me. And he would sneak out of the company to go gambling or to the racetrack. There had been sightings from people in the neighborhood, so we knew about it for a while. The photo taken in the changing room was snapped when he was changing to sneak out, and nobody was supposed to be there. Coincidentally, that employee came in late for a personal reason and managed to take the evidence. Upon learning everything, other employees also wanted to leave, but that's when I informed everyone about the acquisition. One of the employees said to Brandon, We couldn't continue under someone like you, who dumps all work on your wife and acts selfishly. Doesn't it question your dignity as a company executive? All the other employees nodded in agreement. Brandon, looking distressed, muttered softly. It has nothing to do with it. More importantly, someone who can't even cherish his own wife has no right to lead many people, Kevin interjected as he walked in. Kevin! Why are you here? This has nothing to do with you. No, it has everything to do with me. I was the one who suggested our company acquire yours. What? Yes, the acquiring company, Walker Industries, is run by Kevin's brother as the CEO. In other words, that company is Kevin's family business. Kevin had been genuinely concerned that I shouldn't continue being with Brandon. Not just as a husband, but Brandon had shortcomings as a director too. That's why I was facing difficulties both personally and professionally. Kevin had taken all this into account and devised this plan. Brandon, finding himself isolated and at fault both at home and work due to his own negligence. He realized he might lose everything and started to ingratiate himself with Kevin. I was wondering, could I possibly join your company too? Suddenly, he was asking to be employed there as well. Everyone around looked at Brandon with expressions of dismay. Kevin sighed deeply and placed a hand on Brandon's shoulder. If that were the case, it would defeat the purpose of everyone here leaving this company. Besides, it's better for Natalie to be freed from you sooner. When Kevin said that, Brandon quickly turned to me and pressed. Natalie! Do you want to leave me? How am I supposed to live without you? Appealing to me with desperate eyes, I couldn't help but respond with frustration. I'm not the kind of person who can continue with such a superficial marital relationship. Just so you know, I'm neither your mother nor your maid. You need to be alone for once and learn to take care of yourself. After I firmly stated this, Brandon was left speechless. I decided to deliver the final blow by presenting him with divorce papers. Also, I've decided to work as a caregiving staff at the hospital on Kevin's recommendation. I can support myself with my own earnings now. So, let's get a divorce. At my words, Brandon panicked. Divorce? No, wait. Even if you're okay with it, I can't live on my own if I'm unemployed. So, Brandon, just give it up. You, always thinking only about yourself, never considering the feelings of others. Someone like you needs to be alone and cool your head. Kevin yelled at Brandon, leaving him trembling and unable to retort. And so, I left Brandon and moved out of the house. While working as a caregiving staff, I initially stayed in the hospital's staff dormitory. Being over 40 and moving into a dorm filled mostly with young nursing assistants made me a bit self-conscious. However, I felt liberated from my distressing life and was elated. From now on, I aim to work hard and live independently. After the divorce, Brandon continued to live alone in the former family home. Since the company was acquired by Walker Industries, all employees moved on. And the site of Brandon's former company is now vacant. Though unemployed, he still had his own home, so he shouldn't have had to worry about rent, or so one would think. Lately, passing by Brandon's house on my way to work, I hear loud arguments between a man and a woman daily. No matter how late at night, the shouting is always audible, prompting me to ask the neighbors. According to them, Brandon is now cohabitating with a woman. Perhaps desperate not to be alone, he quickly found someone. However, the woman has been complaining about Brandon to the neighbors. When I asked what the complaints were, it was just as I had thought. He earns nothing and leaves all the housework to her, just as before. Frustrated, she frequently confronts him, leading to daily arguments. And they sometimes even threw objects, with the sound of breaking glass echoing in the neighborhood. It's likely that the tattoo, initially hidden, has been discovered, adding to the complaints. It seems a man like Brandon never learns, regardless of whom he is with. The neighbors are also troubled, being disturbed by the noise from Brandon's house until late every night. However, it seems that someone eventually reported the noise complaints to the police, and Brandon was ordered to leave. I heard from the neighbors that the woman he was living with broke up with him at the same time as the eviction. Interestingly, I often see Brandon wrapped in a cardboard box in the park. Since he appears to be without a fixed address, it would likely make reemployment even more difficult. If I ever come across him, I plan to simply ignore and avoid him. But I doubt I'll have to worry about that much longer. After completing my training, my salary as a caregiving staff at the hospital significantly increased. They probably considered the fact that I originally have over 20 years of career experience. I moved into a condo suitable for living alone and bought a car, considering the night shifts. Now that I'm commuting by car, it's unlikely I'll run into homeless Brandon unless something extraordinary happens. At work, I often see Kevin. Thanks to him, I've become more positive about life. And I feel like I've regained my true self. Interestingly, Kevin has also been through a divorce and is currently single. Staff at work often whisper about the possibility of Kevin and me getting remarried. However, I'm content with my current life, so marriage doesn't seem appealing anymore. Kevin, with his carefree personality, probably feels the same. Kevin and I are quite alike. We may not become a couple, but I look forward to continuing as good friends at the same workplace. Finding a friend with whom I can discuss anything at this age is rare.